What's up, everybody? Coach Daisha here, bringing you another hot topic. And this one is one that I've touched on in prior videos. I know I've talked about essential equipment before, bone building equipment, etc. But I tend to get a lot of questions around resistance bands, particularly. So I wanted to do a video dedicated strictly to resistance bands, the pros, the cons, and if resistance bands are right for you when you have a diagnosis of osteoporosis. So let's get started. So before I dive into pros and cons, let's talk about what resistance bands are actually doing. A resistance band is a form of what we call variable resistance. So let's take my tried and true example of a dumbbell curl or a bicep curl, okay? So if we are using a resistance band for a bicep curl, when our arms are extended, the band is at its lightest. As we curl up towards our shoulders, the band is going to be providing its heaviest resistance. So it is changing throughout the motion of the lift. That's considered variable resistance. Whereas if we were holding dumbbells in our hands instead and curling for a bicep curl, we've got the same resistance at the bottom of the movement as we do at the top of the movement. That is called a constant resistance. That is important to recognize because it changes not only how our muscle fibers react to the lift, but it also changes what we do from a form and technique standpoint. What are we doing as we lift it? And especially, what are we doing in the eccentric part of the lift? So keep that in mind, the difference between using a band, which is variable resistance, versus using dumbbells, what we call constant resistance. All right, so let's dive into some of the pros of using resistance bands. First off, they are very joint friendly. Because the bands themselves weigh hardly anything, they can be perfect for somebody who is not looking to necessarily load the joints. You've heard me talk about this before. With osteoporosis, sometimes somebody might actually have another diagnosis. Maybe there's an arthritis diagnosis as well. And maybe loading those joints is not what you're looking for. You're just looking to actually strengthen the muscles around the joint. If that's the case, resistance bands can be a great alternative to dumbbells, kettlebells, etc., because you won't necessarily be loading the joint when you use them. One of my favorite things about resistance bands is that they travel well. You never have to worry about, if you're going on vacation, staying at a hotel somewhere, what am I going to use to stay fit? What am I going to use to continue to strength train? Those resistance bands fold up and go into your luggage so easily. So they are great for travel. They're amazing for warm-ups, and they are great for mobility work. And last but not least, resistance bands are wonderful for newbies. If you are new to strength training and we have got to work on form and technique, resistance bands can be a wonderful entry point into strength training. They can also be extremely helpful if you are recovering from an injury. That's probably why you have noticed your physical therapist using this if you've ever had to do rehab sessions. Resistance bands can be great if you are new to strength training and or if you are rehabbing from an injury. Now, let's get into some of the cons. I hate calling it cons, but let's get into some of the reasons why resistance bands may not be the best form of equipment that you use when it comes to your strength training. The main thing is that our bones, when we are trying to build bone mineral density, our bones are looking for consistent compressive forces, right? You're not getting that from a resistance band because a resistance band doesn't really weigh anything. Even if you're using something a little bit more hefty like the X3 bar, we're still talking about something that is fairly light in comparison to dumbbells, kettlebells, etc. And remember, we are always looking for progression. When it comes to bands, it is very hard for us to know how we're progressing over time. As a matter of fact, with any band, you're going to get to its limit before it would technically break. So it's very hard for us to know, okay, I started here and I'm progressing. How do I know I'm progressing? I can't really quantify what this band is doing. So what we are looking for when it comes to strength training, once again, is the progression of the weight over time and we're looking for that load. If load is appropriate for us. Once again, we've talked about if you've got arthritis, etc., maybe load is not what you're looking for. But if you can load, we're looking for that load. And a resistance band can't give us that. The other thing that you have to be cognizant of when it comes to bands is the eccentric part of the lift. All right. So this is important, especially when we talk about form, technique, and injury risk. So back to our bicep curls. If I'm using dumbbells for my bicep curls, let's say I have 10 pounds in each hand. When I curl up towards my shoulders, that's what we call the concentric part of the lift. Concentric meaning that the muscle is shortening. Now I have to get the dumbbells back down to the original spot, right? Now in this case, technically my triceps are getting tighter, right? So this is actually a concentric lift for the triceps, but my biceps are still working. You know why? My biceps are fighting gravity to help us safely lower the dumbbells back to the starting position. That part of our biceps working is the eccentric part of the lift, okay? So concentric for biceps here, eccentric for biceps as we lower back down. So keep this in mind. It is easier for us to control the eccentric part of the lift when we have dumbbells, kettlebells, etc., than it is with a resistance band. And this is why. That resistance band is trying to help you, right? It is shortening, and so it is actually helping you, which sounds like a good thing. But if you let the band help you get back down there and you don't control that back down, you run the risk of injury to the joint. In this case, we're talking about the elbow. You are risking the chance of a sprain, strain, maybe even possibly a fracture if you let the band completely control that eccentric part of your lift, that lowering back down to the start. This is where form, technique, and safety is paramount. You have to be a little bit more cognizant of that eccentric part of your lift when you're using bands, more so than when you're using other forms of equipment, dumbbells, kettlebells, etc. So what is the bottom line when it comes to bands? Bands are beneficial. You can use bands for strength training. But hopefully you have listened to some of the other points that I made in this video as to the limitations to bands. Remember, if you are strength training to build bone mineral density, you have to have progressive strength training under gravity, weight bearing, with some load. That's what we are looking for. Bands are missing some of those components. And you're also missing the chance to build strength through the entire range of motion. Remember, your band is very light at the bottom and only getting heavier when you get to the top of the move. Whereas when you are using a more constant resistance, it is actually building that strength throughout the entire muscle fiber and the entire range of motion. So please keep all those things in mind when you think about your resistance bands. I always encourage people, if you have resistance bands, use them, but don't let them be the be all and end all. Make sure you are using free weights out in space and time. That way you can move in all planes of motion and not kind of be stuck in one area, which most of us are stuck in when we're using resistance bands. So to wrap this all up with a nice bow, can you use resistance bands? Of course. I would encourage you to not let them be the only part of your resistance training. Let them kind of be a sidekick, if you will, to your dumbbells and kettlebells and the things that you can use out in space and time for more functional movements. So I hope that information was helpful for you and helps you decide whether resistance bands are going to be a major part of your routine or, once again, more of a minor, sidekick, if you will. If you are somebody with osteoporosis or osteopenia and you're looking for a more personalized workout plan, then I have got some great news for you. I have now developed an 8-week strength program that is perfect for women with osteoporosis or osteopenia who need to know exactly what to do when it comes to their strength training. If you are interested, I've got the link right here in this video to that special announcement where you can go and find out more information. Thanks for watching today, and I will see you for another hot topic.